Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee members. Welcome to this morning's Heritage Kingston meeting. Mr. Chair, I'm just going to ask you to unmute so that we can make sure that you can hear us. Excellent. You were there and then you muted yourself again.
There we go.
Perfect. Excellent. Okay. Mr. Chair, through you, I'm just going to run through quickly to confirm that we do have quorum for this morning. We have received regrets from Ms. Burney and Ms. McFarland, who will not be joining us. Otherwise, we have all committee members present. Joining us from staff is Jennifer Campbell, Director of Heritage Services, Andrea Gummo, Manager of Heritage Planning, Kevin Gibbs, Manager of Heritage Programming, and Philip Prell, Intermediate Planner. We also have 4 applicants joining us for this morning's applications, and we have 1 member of the public joining us in the gallery. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. 9:32, calling the meeting to order. You have an agenda. Do we have any amendments to that agenda? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm missing a face somewhere. Oh, I've got 2 down there, 9, 10. Good. Amendments to the agenda? Seeing none, then looking for a motion to approve the agenda as printed. I see Jennifer Demeter and I see Councillor Doherty. Further discussion? Seeing none, those in favour of the agenda as printed?
Aye.
And that carries then. We have minutes of April the 20th. I have had no comments of changes in those. Are there any known errors that you want to point out at this time? And seeing none, looking for a mover for the those minutes of April 20 as printed. Paul Banfield, seconded by Don Taylor. Thank you very much. Any discussion there? And seeing none, those in favour of their approval, you can raise your hands or shout. Thank you. And you have a set of minutes, which means that book goes out the way. Pecuniary interest. Is anybody known to have pecuniary interest in any of the 4 properties we're looking at today? And if it comes up later on, please feel free to let me know immediately that you realise that you forgot. I believe we have no presentations, no delegations. There will be a briefing, but it's going to be heard after business item E. That's the report on the Heritage Kingston Review Working Group, which brings us down to today's business. Do I hear anything from Cultural Heritage or Policy Development or the museums? Which brings us down to stat business. And all of these are part 5. So Philip, they're also all yours. I don't know how you manage that, but you have a busy morning.
Indeed. Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. Hope everyone's having a great day today. We're going to get started with probably one of the more jam-packed ones where there are 4 recommendations. This is about 30, 32, 34, and 36 Sydenham Street. These permits were grouped under one report with 4 decisions as they all encompass the change in the roof material, but there are also ones that deal with select roof alterations. Next slide, please. The subject properties, collectively known as Clyde Terrace, with the municipal address of 30, 32, 34, and 36 Sydenham Street, are in the Old Sydenham Heritage Conservation District and extend from the corner of Earl and Sydenham Street to the middle of the block and are approximately 110 meters north of the cricket field. Next slide, please. The collective properties are currently developed with a series of 2-story row houses for a total of 3 units in red brick with a limestone foundation. Next slide, please. So the properties are designated under Part 4 and 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act, where the most relevant attributes for this set of alterations include the symmetrical sections, each 5 bays wide. The rear facade is symmetrically patterned fenestration with windows at 3 levels. A narrow projection indicates the firewall, which divides the buildings in 2, and chimneys rise from each end of the building and from the roof between 22 and 24 Sydenham Street. Next slide, please. So all 4 addresses and all 4 applications are pursuing the same roof alteration and intend to complete this work at the same time. When considering the roof, the historic profile of the modest low-pitched gable roof of 30, 32, and 34 Sydenham Street and the hip gable roof of 36 Sydenham Street, these, and in terms of the profile, are the key attributes of this particular roof, where the existing asphalt material is heritage neutral. As the profile is the most important roof element and the material should proceed into the background and or complement the building, a change in this kind of fashion is appropriate. As inconsistencies in roof materials between each unit have had a negative impact, the 4 owners intend to do the roof material change at the same time, which would result in visual continuity between all units. The new roof will have a 0.4 to 0.5 meter or 16 to 20 inch smooth gray Titan standing seam panel, which emulate historic forms and will also have snow stops and a new vapor barrier for safety and longevity purposes. Next slide, please. 2 addresses, namely 34 and 36 Sydenham Street, are proposing 2 rear yard facing dormers per property with the same material, configuration, and window styles. Despite the top rendering showing the peak of the dormers exceeding the peak of the roof, the intention is to have these dormer peaks not exceed that threshold, and this is a condition. These dormers will be clad in solid stained wood clapboard and have the same standing roof material as the rest of the roof that was previously mentioned. We'll have wood fascia, apologies for that, and a wood trim. Further, each dormer will also have associated aluminum clad wood double hung windows, which is consistent with the rear facade of the properties. The colors are yet to be determined, and their color selection will be subject to staff review. This is also a condition of approval. The design of the proposed dormers take inspiration from the district and are secondary to the building. They face the rear yard and maintain the historic roof profile, thus their impact is considered minor. Next slide, please. 1 address, 30 Sydenham Street, is seeking approval to install 2 skylights approximately 0.6 by 1.2 meters or 22 by 46 inches away from public view on the rear roof of the main heritage building. These quote unquote fresh air skylights can only be open approximately 5 to 8 centimeters or 2 to 3 inches. These skylights are not visible when walking along Sydenham Street nor on Earl Street due to their location and due to the existing addition behind 30 Sydenham Street. Next slide, please. So this is the first recommendation for 30 Sydenham Street, that Heritage Kingston supports council approval of the following 4 recommendations. Recommendation 1 is related to the skylight and roof material change alteration at 30 Sydenham. And I wanted to highlight that staff will be circulated the final skylight dimensions and dimensions in design prior to installation. Next slide, please. Recommendation 2 is related only to the roof material change at 32 Sydenham Street. Next slide, please. Recommendation 3 is related to the roof material change and dormer addition alteration at 34 Sydenham Street. A couple I wanted to highlight here is that Heritage staff will be circulated the proposed color of the clapboard siding, fascia, and wood window trim for approval prior to installation. Staff will also be circulated the finalized window details before installation, and the dormer roof peaks will be below the existing roof ridge line. Next slide, please. And recommendation 4 is just like recommendation 3 and is related to the roof material change and dormer additions and have the same key points highlighted previously. And with that, thank you, everyone. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Okay, thank you very much, Philip. Firstly, can I ask members if their dash comments were correctly added into the agenda? And seeing no concerns, I presume yes. Members of the public, owners, agents.
Hi, my name's Jan. I'm the, okay, there we go. Hi, I'm Jan Leclerc. I am the co-owner of 34 Sydenham, and I have with me today Ted Lester, who's the owner of 30 Sydenham Street.
Okay. Do you have comments to make?
No, it seems straightforward. The application and the synopsis captured everything quite well.
Okay, thank you. Any other members of the public?
No, just the 2 of us.
Yep. Madam
Mr.
Clerk,
Chair.
yep.
I'm not seeing any further hands.
No, I'm not seeing any either. So, okay, thank you very much. Committee members, questions, comments, thoughts? Mr. Taylor. You need to unmute yourself.
Sorry, no serious concerns, but I just want to raise a couple of very minor points. The description mentions some traces of the firewall or parapet wall between these houses, and I just wondered if the roofing contractor is aware of the possibility of a problem of dealing with it. I mean, asphalt shingles are flexible and they can just bend over a little hump in the roof, but steel roofing panels are not flexible. And I don't think there needs to be discussion, but I want to make sure that staff bring this point to the attention of the owners when they receive building permit plans. And I guess another point that arose in the comments was the dormer windows really should be a little bit smaller than the main windows, so that the dormers do indeed appear as secondary to the main property. So again, when detailed drawings are available, I hope staff will check those points. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Taylor. Further comments, questions?
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. My name's Ted Lester. Just a point of clarification, please. There are no firewalls between the units. In the attic cavities, there are smoke screens. So that's a 2x4 construction with 5/8 fire rated drywall on both sides.
Okay.
Nothing pierces through the roof deck. I mean, it might appear that way because of the unevenness, and that's because some of the roofs have been sheeted and some have not. My roof, for example, has the original roof boards on it. There's no sheeting whatsoever. So the intent is, before the steel roof goes on, is to strip everything, sheet it all with 1/2-inch plywood. 3/8 won't really work. The original roof boards, between a lot of the boards, they range from 12 to 20 inches in width. There's a good 2 inches of gap some places, which they had there so that the original wood shingle would breathe properly. And there still are traces of the wood shingles in some of the attics. So we're going to put the 1/2-inch plywood over top of everything. It should even it all off. And then you've got a proper grip for the screws for the steel to sink into. The smoke screens are going to stay intact, that's for sure. And they're all in pretty good shape. At least I can just attest to the one between 30 and 32. All the joints are mudded and taped, and they're supposed to suffice in case there is a fire to prohibit the entry of smoke into the other units. I hope that helps clarify that.
Yep, thank you very much. Is that okay, Don? Yep. You had another comment as well, did you? Mr.
No.
Taylor? No?
No.
Okay. Councillor Doherty, that's right, you had a question.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. I might have missed it in the report, but one of the conditions is that a tree permit may apply, but I'm not too sure why. Are there plans to cut a tree down, or why is that part of one of the conditions?
Philip, can you elaborate?
So through you, Mr. Chair, I do want to mention that this comment was provided by an external department, but I can give you some general information that would assist their counselor. So in this case, the city, because the front lot line is so close to the building, which is very common for these heritage properties, in particular in Old Sydenham, some of the trees and even foliage is on city property. And so, or is near city property. And so the city, without having a formal survey, wouldn't know if they're, city trees or not. And if they are, or they might be, they want to have tree protection around them. So there's no trees that are going to be coming down, or no trees that are hopefully going to be damaged at all. The hope being through a tree permit process that they will be able to put up fencing or some kind of protection over the root systems to actually protect the trees. So just to make sure that there's no trees are coming down, not that I'm aware of, and I don't believe it's necessary for the roof stuff, but it's more for the protection of the trees in general. Thank you.
Thanks, that makes a lot of sense.
Thank you very much. Other questions, comments? I see no hands, I see no waving. We have gone through that, we've gone through that. Final comments to be made? And if not, the motion is, I think, one of the longest we have ever dealt with. It's the full 3 pages, page 3, 4, 3, 4, and 5 of your report. It includes 4 recommendations and a different number of conditions on each of those recommendations. Looking for a mover for the whole 3 pages, which I will not read to you. It's moved by Jennifer, seconder. Councillor Doherty, thank you very much. Any further discussion? And seeing none, I ask you to raise your hand or shout. Those in favour?
Aye.
And those against? And that carries. And Madam Clerk, you may just check with Janine knows how to shout or how to make her shout heard. That carries. Thank you very much, applicants and Philip, for I think one of the most complicated ones that we've dealt with over the years, and well presented and beautiful work, and good luck on quite a project. You will be watched.
I had so much fun.
I'm sure that's what they all say when they come to us.
Well, I will give a tip of the hat to Philip since he's here. He was incredibly supportive and helpful and guided me through it. And, thanks to my neighbors, they just let me have at her and sign the agent of record forms. And it's great that Ted came today, but it's been nice to channel everything and have that availability process from the city to allow us to do that. I don't know how many collaborative projects you get, probably not many.
No, we don't get many. I was just going to say how nice, I don't remember a 4 one. We get pairs, but a 4 is, Don Taylor may remember one, but they're unusual, and it's really neat to see it done this way.
Yeah.
If I could just add one thing, please. Assuming the project goes forward, it won't happen until next year at the earliest.
Yep.
We've got chimneys to rebuild and stuff to do and get our ducks in a row. So
we won't all be standing on the sidewalk watching. Don't worry. Good luck with it anyway. We'll look forward to seeing it.
Yeah. And
Thank
I have
you.
one more question as well. Part of this application was also a grant application. Is there anything I need to know, be aware of on the grant piece that's partnered with this?
I don't deal with that. Philip will be in touch with you if there is.
Okay, great.
And when there is, I should say. Okay, so good luck with that as well.
Thank you.
thanks.
Okay, Philip, we move on to, what do we move on to? 70 Wellington Street.
Hello again, everybody. So through you, Mr. Chair. So this permit for 70 Wellington Street is to replace 3 types of roofing material, which currently are shingle, asphalt, and 2-ply mod bit roofing with standing seam metal panels and asphalt. Next slide, please. So the subject property, 70 Wellington Street, is located approximately 10 meters south of the intersection of Earl and Wellington Street, and the approximately 240 meters northeast of City Park. Next slide, please. So the property is developed with a 2-story high, 2-bay wide stone building and is slightly taller than the adjoining corner lot neighbor, 32 Wellington Street. Next slide, please. So the subject property is designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act and has the following relevant attributes related to this application. It is suspected that another building adjoins 70 Wellington Street, but was lost and now has been replaced by a 1-story stone structure with a lean-to roof, which has a number of skylights. And a frame addition with a rear balcony has been added recently to the back slope of the roof and is visible over the roof ridge when viewed from Wellington Street. Next slide, please. Apologies for the graphical detailing. This was on Google 3D. But as you can see, those are the 3 major roofs that are going to be replaced there on the top right-hand drawing over there. And the color of the metals shown on the left there. So changes to permit the standing seam metal roofing and asphalt will have a neutral heritage impact on the property and district while providing the following benefits. The alteration will address an active water leak and make maintenance easier. The installation will result in more consistent and durable materials. The use of a shadow deep gray should not draw significant attention to this material change, especially since the asphalt shingles will be planned and not architectural shingles. This is a condition of approval, and the historical roofline will remain unaltered. Overall, this project is a neutral change to the heritage value of the property. And next slide, please. And that's it. There's not a whole lot to mention here in terms of the recommendation. And next slide, please, again. The one thing I wanted to draw your attention to is that the asphalt shingles are to be planned to minimize attention. And that's it. Thank you, everybody.
Good. Thank you very much, Philip. Thank you for explaining that odd part on the left side of the building as you're on Wellington Street. There's a building disappeared. Never crossed my mind. Members, can you confirm or complain about your dash comments as they've been recorded? And I think we're all okay there. Members of the public or the agents or the owners, if you could raise a hand or let it be known that you wish to speak. And I don't, oh, sorry, Sandra, I've only got half your name there. Sandra Carlson Lecky. If you can unmute yourself. Hi, welcome.
Hi, thank you for letting me speak here today. I'm here as a proxy agent, I guess, for Mac Gervin. I'm the owner. And the only thing I would mention about this, this submission is that I think the intention initially was to put the 2-ply mod back on that 3rd floor flat roof. It translated into today's presentation as the steel roof, but it's fairly flat and I don't know if the steel will accommodate the slope. So that would just be my one comment. Otherwise, everything is as is. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for being with us. Committee, other comment? Oh, sorry, any other public comments? And seeing none then, committee questions? Last chance. Oh, very good. So you don't have any final comments. If you didn't have any comments before, the motion is not, oh, done, yes.
Sorry, I wasn't sure whether I would get another chance. Again, just a very minor comment, but I noticed that in this application, we see a choice of gray colors for the steel roofing, just as in the previous one. The previous one chose the lightest of the different shades of gray, and this one chose the darkest. And it's not a big deal, but my suggestion is that a lighter colored gray does have advantages. It looks, I think, a little bit more like a weathered cedar shingle, and also it absorbs less, it has less tendency to absorb sunlight and then to melt the snow and ice on the roof, which helps it slide off. So it may be that a lighter color roof is better in terms of avoiding ice and snow sliding off the roof. It's just a suggestion, really, but that's something for the record.
Thank you, Don. Philip?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with everything you said, Don. I believe the reason that this was chosen is just because they're trying to match it with black shingles, because I think that's why they're trying to do it for continuity's sake. And from a visual perspective, I think it might blend a bit better, but I do agree that there are a lot of functional aspects to a lighter color that could be explored as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Other final comments, questions? Seeing and hearing none, then the motion cannot be amended or anything, so I'm looking for a mover and a seconder to approve it as printed. You have 2 parts to it and 5 conditions. Don't all rush at once. Don Taylor, and seconded by Don Mitchell. Discussion, which we've really looked through already. So voting in favor of as the motion as printed on our page 6, you raise your hand or shout.
Aye.
And that carries. So thank you very much. Good luck, Sandra, with that. Say hello to Mac for us. And Philip, you ready to carry on? Oh, sorry, do you want to make a comment, Sandra? You need to unmute.
I just wanted to thank you very much for the time this morning. Thanks. Take care.
Thank you indeed. That moves us then on to 42 Lower Union Street.
Through you, Mr. Chair. This is me again. So this is 32 Lower Union Street. This permit is to alter the westerly wall by expanding an existing opening to accommodate a window and to add a shed dormer on the rear roof, mostly away from the view along Lower Union Street. Next slide, please. So the subject property is located mid-block between King Street and Ontario Street, and it's approximately 60 meters west from the Navy Memorial Park and approximately 130 meters east of City Park. Next slide, please. So 42 Lower Union Street is one of a series of 3 similar row houses along Lower Union Street and stands 2.5 stories tall with a brick facade and has a limestone foundation. Next slide, please. So the property is designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and has the following relevant attributes. So brick chimneys extend from the southeast side of 38 and 42 Lower Union Street, and the building's side gable roof is raised above that of its neighbor to the southeast side, and the other end, the west wall of 42 Lower Union Street, terminates at a firewall. Next slide, please. So there's a lot going on in the pictures here, but I promise it will make sense in just a moment. So the above pictures show the westerly wall, which currently accommodates a vent hole that is proposed to be removed. The bottom portion of the westerly wall is currently obscured behind a stone wall and wood fence at the neighboring property, 157 King Street East. This vent hole is proposed to be widened to accommodate a square or rectangular inoperable aluminum-clad wood window with a white trim and external muntin bars. Review of the material, configuration, and color is a condition of approval. While the HCD plan discourages the creation of new openings on facades visible from the street, the subject proposal is expanding an existing opening while removing a related unsympathetic projection. Due to the strong building street edge and the existing protected stone wall with its associated private wood fence at the rear of 157 King Street East, there are limited opportunities to view this alteration on the lower portion of the westerly wall when walking towards Ontario Street on Lower Union. To accommodate the window, the applicant will be required to number, note the location of, and retain the removed bricks for reversibility purposes. This is a condition of approval as well. Next slide, please. So the above pictures and renderings show the proposed shed dormer massing, location, and proximity to a similar dormer located at the neighboring 40 Lower Union Street. Importantly, when referring to the top left-hand picture, the roof of the dormer will originate at the peak of the existing roof and radiate down, and will not begin at the middle of the roof, as the rendering shows. The new dormer requires a Planning Act approval, as any property alteration to this property requires approval from the Committee of Adjustment or Council. This is due to very specific language in the zoning bylaw. So achieving a planning approval is a condition of approval. The proposed rear-facing dormer is approximately 3.6 meters wide by 2.1 meters tall, or 12 by 7 feet, with horizontal cedar siding and a white corner molding, which will feature 4x4, which will feature 4 side-by-side, my apologies, vertical oriented 0.6 meter wide by 0.9 meters tall or 2 by 3 feet, aluminum clad wood sash windows with a white trim. The roof will be clad in asphalt shingles like that of the existing dwelling. This massing is a similar size and configuration to that at the neighboring property, 40 Lower Union Street, but without a balcony. The historical roof profile along 42 Union Street will be retained, and the top of the dormer will not be visible from Lower Union Street. This is a condition of approval. As 42 Lower Union Street is mid-block location, this is an appropriate area for a rear-facing addition. The proposed horizontal cedar siding, white molding, aluminum clad sash windows with external Muntin bars and a white trim are sympathetic to the property. A review of the material, configuration, and colors are also a condition of approval. The shed dormer should be inconspicuous when viewed along Lower Union Street, but will be visible from Ontario Street. The firewall along the western facade operates like a parapet wall, which along with the dormer's mid-roof location should provide a sufficient visual obstruction to prevent the shed dormer's side profile from being visible at most street level viewpoints. However, if the dormer is viewed from the side on Lower Union Street, it will have a similar visual profile to that of the small dormers that are currently on 38 and 40 Lower Union Street. The proposed shed dormer would mainly be visible when walking north along Ontario Street, as you can see in the bottom right-hand picture, due to a large parking lot associated with 32 Ontario Street, but would seasonally be obscured by a large coniferous tree. The overall anticipated negative impacts of adding a rear shed dormer are limited. Due to the existence of the neighboring dormer, it would face the rear yard, it would be clearly secondary to the overall building. It is proposed on a mid-block property. The associated windows and siding would be sympathetic to the district and the building in general. The roof is not considered a key heritage attribute itself. The existing historic roof profile will be maintained, and most importantly, it should be mostly invisible along the Lower Union Street facade, which is the focus of the Heritage Conservation District Plan entry on this particular property. Next slide, please. This puts all of that information in writing that I just described to you guys. Next slide. And I wanted to highlight a couple of conditions as well, like my previous reports here, where importantly, staff will be provided with pictures of the windows and sidings and molding prior to installation. The removed bricks from the proposed window opening are to be numbered and retained for reversibility purposes. And the peak of the shed dormer will not be visible along Lower Union Street. And with that, I will conclude. And if anyone has questions, more than happy to help answer. Thank you.
Good, thank you very much. Dash comments being recorded correctly. Does anybody want to comment there? And seeing none then, members of the public, do we have agent or owner wanting to take part here? If you could raise a hand. Sam Miller, sorry, there you go, sir. Welcome.
Hello.
Good morning.
Thanks for your time.
You are owner?
I am the agent on behalf of the owners.
The agent, thank you. Do you have comments to add to Philip's presentation?
No, Philip did a wonderful job, as usual. I should note that I'm a technophobe. I retired from high school teaching 4 years ago, and Zoom calls are foreign to me on purpose. But I want to assure you all that I wore pants.
Thank you so much. Other members of the public, I'm not seeing any there. Is that right, Madam Clerk?
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay, committee members, questions, comments? You can, Don Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, just two quick questions. One for clarity, which is my understanding from the application was that the rear facing wall of the dormer was going to sit behind a brick wall on joists, 6 inches behind or something. But one of the drawings I was looking at, it seems to line up right on top of the wall. And I just wondered clarity about that. And my second question, I guess, would be to staff, which is the bricks are taken out and numbered. Is there a process that stays with the property going forward that sort of ensures that those are retained? And those are my two questions. Thank you.
I can certainly speak to the first question. That there are a few iterations of the drawings. This is my first proposal to the Heritage Committee. And indeed, the wall will sit on the joists inside of the brick wall at the back of the home. And it is, the joists are embedded in the brick wall at the back of the home. So it is indeed, those joists are indeed load bearing. The second part, maybe I can defer to Phil. We can accommodate whatever is required in terms of storing the bricks and numbering the bricks for historical purposes, but I'm not sure of a particular process that would work best.
Yeah, no, it's a good question, Don, that hasn't come up before. Philip, do you have any comments on that? What do we do when we've asked people to retain brickwork, stonework?
So great question, by the way, through you, Mr. Chair. So I can confirm that this is just a condition of the heritage permit. We don't have any mechanisms at this time that have been built in for the long term, but the intent is that it would be for the life of the permit. It is, of course, hope that it will be retained longer term for obvious reasons. But at this time, we don't have something that would be, we don't have a trigger that would allow this to go longer than that.
And, I don't want to wander off topic here, but it's certainly something that has come up before and maybe should be looked at some point by heritage people as to where they should be stored and whether they can only go back to this house, because every so often we get requests from people saying, do you have any bricks? Where can I source bricks? We had some question the other day exactly on that, on stone as well. So let's just leave that as a question to be talked about by the Heritage Department, and I won't say a solution come up with, but at least some suggestions. So thanks for asking that, Don. So it's, it's easy to say, oh, keep them with numbers on, but you know what happens when the next order comes along. Other questions, other comments from committee members? And seeing and hearing no movement, that is really count as final comments. So I look for a mover and a seconder for the motion as printed. 3 parts to it, and then the conditions, and 11 conditions. Jennifer, are you moving? Thank you. Seconded by Don Mitchell. Any further discussion? And seeing none, if you can raise your hands or shout, those in favor.
Aye.
Thank you, Janine, for a hand. Excellent, that carries. I just asked officially, any opposed? And that carries then. So thank you very much. Thank you for coming, Sam. Thank you again, Phil. I think I'll do a general thank you to you at the end. You've been abandoned today. Which brings us on to 40 Simcoe Street.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Hello again. Yes. I will say though, despite me presenting here, I promise my colleagues are working on some other very important things like our grant program and some other policy work in the background, but your sentiment is appreciated, Peter. So through you, Mr. Chair, the proposal at 40 Simcoe Street is related to replacing the stair and landing concrete caps and changing those to limestone, and then adding black carbon steel railings to the stairs. I wanted to clarify that in my original circulation, I thought they were iron, but after discussion, they are actually black carbon steel. And so I wanted to bring that to your attention at this time. Next slide, please. The subject property with the municipal address of 40 Simcoe Street is located mid-block between King Street East and Lake Ontario and is approximately 70 meters south of City Park. Next slide, please. 40 Simcoe Street is one of a series of 3 row houses along Simcoe Street that stands 2.5 stories tall with a limestone facade with an elevated entrance atop stone and cement stairs. Next slide, please. The subject property is designated under parts 4 and 5 and has the following relevant attributes related to this application. This row house set is a dominant aspect of the streetscape and has a high contextual value that harmonizes with the stone wall and coach house of the neighboring 85 King Street East property. Next slide, please. So the existing concrete stairs have done a decent job of currently protecting the stair stone walls from water infiltration, but are now deteriorated, and today are not protecting the stone wall from water infiltration at this time. The existing stairs are not noted heritage features in the designation bylaw or heritage district entry, but are sympathetic to the limestone facade of the building and are consistent with the neighboring properties. The alteration proposal includes replacing the existing concrete caps, locally sourced limestone caps, and a traditional bush hammered finish. These limestone caps are a more appropriate material and designed to better protect the stairs from water infiltration. The addition of a limestone cap will better blend with the stone walls and with the building facade, while also protecting the stone stairs from future water infiltration. Next slide, please. So the newly proposed black carbon steel railings are provided by a blacksmith working for Forged in Canada. These railings will have a gloss finish and are to be set in the newly proposed limestone with lead. The railings are meant to only be on the stair portion of the porch and will be absent from the landing portion. All three styles are heritage appropriate and are sympathetic to the property with differing levels of ornamentation. The reintroduction of black railings will be more consistent with the other row houses in this series. Since 40 Simcoe Street stairs-less entrance are the most obvious external feature when entering Simcoe Street from King Street East, the positive impact of a more sympathetic material would be greater than the potential marginal negative impact of material inconsistencies between row houses. Next slide, please. So this is the recommendation that's putting all of that into words. Next slide, please. So I wanted to also flag here that the new limestone caps and carbon steel railings are to be subtly noted with the year of installation for legibility purposes in case there are future alterations to the property. And with that, thank you very much, everyone. I'm here to answer any questions as needed.
I'm just thinking on your subtly noted. I've never seen that one before, but I think it's a bright idea. I always hammer a coin into work that I do on the house for dates, but no, put it so you're simply going to engrave the year on somewhere hidden away on that railing. Excellent. Sorry, questions, public, owners, agents? Seeing none, is that right, Madam Clerk?
That's correct, Mr. Chair. I do see that Mr. Beattie is present. I wasn't sure if he had anything that he would like to say.
Yeah.
The application.
Mr. Beattie, do you want to?
No, I'm just here. I'm the mason that's going to be installing the cap, so I'm just here in case there were any questions related to that.
Yep, no, that's fine. You don't have to speak. Don't worry. Committee members, questions, comments, concerns? Oh, what a lovely group you are today. Goodness me. Okay, so that moves us on then to the motion as printed on pages 8 and 9, 5 parts to it and 8 conditions. Looking for a mover. Paul Benfield and seconded by Don Taylor. Any last minute thoughts? And seeing none, ask you to raise a hand or call out in favor.
Aye.
And that, I think, has everybody. If there anybody opposed, so that carries. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming, Craig. And Philip, thank you for that long time on this morning. That was excellent.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Have a great day, everyone.
Yes, thank you. It brings us down to Part E, the committee consultation on the proposed recommendation of the Heritage Kingston Review Working Group. And is that you, Jennifer? Or yes, see you've come up on screen. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Just excellent. I'm hoping everyone can see the slides.
Ooh,
I am
yes.
going to try to contain this briefing to 10 minutes. There's a lot of information shared via this report on the working group. The committee has been receiving updates from the working group over the course of the last almost 2 years through the notes that have been submitted, but happy to answer questions as they come up today. I also did want to point out at the start that today is International Museums Day. So if you have a chance, go out and visit a local museum. Our own City of Kingston Pump House is open for the season, and the committee will be receiving a programming update next month at the committee meeting. All right, well, next slide, please. All right, well, the Heritage Kingston Review Working Group was formed with a mandate to look at the composition, the mandate, and the procedures of what we know as the Heritage Kingston Committee. This mandate and direction and request of the working group came forward after, in 2016, some committee members will remember, a new Heritage Kingston Committee was formed through the amalgamation of the two previous committees, one that dealt largely with heritage properties and another that dealt with museums and collections, and what was brought together in 2016, forming Heritage Kingston. So the request to consider how the committee is functioning, its composition, mandate, and procedures was brought forward. And we've been working over the last several years to work on this. This has been impacted by COVID, and in the report, you do see a timeline breakdown of sort of how the work has played out over time and the reasons why we have had some delays in bringing this report back to committee. So we were asked to consult with cultural heritage stakeholders, including members of the public through surveys, personal interviews, and previous members of Heritage Kingston. And this was completed and is shared as part of the exhibit, the summary of what we heard. The working group also undertook a review of previously completed work, particularly from the transition team that worked to bring the Heritage Kingston Committee into its current form in that 2016 recommendation approved by Council. The other part that's important to remember when looking at the work of the working group is that the working group was directed to work within the legal advisement of the City of Kingston Legal Counsel in its interpretation of legislation and statutory guidelines and policies related to the mandates. And then finally, we're going to be bringing the review working group recommendations to Council through a staff report. And today we're really here as an active consultation with the Heritage Committee to share where we're headed with our recommendations and hopefully to get some feedback so that the working group can look at what is being recommended and ensure that we've considered committee's input as well. Next slide, please. So the proposed recommendations in this information report are sort of wide-ranging. They are designed to respond to the feedback that was received from both those public survey opportunities, those interviews, as well as through committee discussions or working group discussions, pardon me, themselves. So the first recommendation, these aren't in necessarily the order, but at a high level, we have the desire to refine the mandate of Heritage Kingston, and in so refining to actually return to two separate committees. There's a lot of feedback around the mandate makes sense from a sort of philosophical or kind of understanding of how heritage is a wide-ranging and important aspect of our community, but functionally the committee's mandate is very large and it makes it very difficult for the committee to engage with work, but also to attract members who have appropriate areas of interest that cover such a broad-reaching mandate. We are proposing to move to a three-stream heritage approval process, which I will discuss in detail in just a moment. We are requesting or would be requesting to change the agenda structures just to support engagement, transparency, hopefully following the necessary decorum and processes that are required of a committee, but also ensuring that there are opportunities for transparency and feedback on approvals and permits and the like. There is a desire to continue to work and align with the work that's happening with another city committee, the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee, which is currently looking at how can we attract more diverse community members to join city committees. And it was identified throughout the review that equity, diversity, and inclusion and committee membership's diversity is something that the Heritage Kingston Committee could also benefit from. We're looking at an opportunity or a recommendation to ask for an opportunity for both the chair as well as staff to provide communication to the nominations committee, identifying needed skills and knowledge gaps within the committee structure at any time when the nominations committee is asked to find additional members. Right now, that is just something the nominations committee does based on mandates. So we're seeking an opportunity for at least the chair and staff to be able to identify if there are skill gaps because people have stepped away. We're also looking to improve the resources and the data accessibility that we have on our website and through the Heritage Resource Center. A lot of feedback came in about having really clear processes laid out for community members with very clear understandings of who has decision-making authority on different levels of consideration and permit applications in particular, and how the Heritage Resource Center, as well as our online resources, can best support heritage property owners, applicants, and even committee members who may need to reference heritage documents, materials, processes in the completion of your work as a committee. And then finally, we are looking to have staff work to understand through community really where the gaps in Dash usability are, and also work with committee members to help to smooth or improve the process of offering feedback over Dash. We've had a lot of comments, both from committee members as well as from members of the public, that the Dash system is not perhaps as user-friendly as we might hope it to be. And so we think that there needs to be a bit of a targeted examination of how we can make improvements in that system. Next slide, please. So one of the key recommendations then begins with returning to a two-committee structure. And the intent here is to essentially create two committees. One we are proposing to call the Kingston Heritage Programs Committee, and the other is the Kingston Heritage Properties Committee. Names were huge debates, and we are certainly open to receiving feedback on names. But the intent here is that the first committee there would largely deal with museums, collections, programs, engagement opportunities, and intangible heritage discussions. And then the second committee would be more targeted to those aspects of heritage that are specifically handled or governed through the Ontario Heritage Act, through built property permit applications, and all of the associated requests for alteration or changes to heritage properties within the city. We know that there is overlap between these two committees, and we know that there could be overlapping interest. The intent here is to be able to draw committee membership that would best align to these areas of interest, to also support community members to attend a committee and engage with committees that are more targeted to perhaps their specific areas of interest or requirements for permits. But we also know that the committees may want to engage with the work of the other. And that is certainly something that we don't want to prohibit. So we were looking at ways to appropriately allow for correspondence between the committees and opportunities. And of course, committee members can attend other committee meetings as members of the public, and are certainly welcome to provide input, but also through more formal structures like correspondence between chairs, if there is a desire to coordinate on a topic or an item of heritage interest. Next slide, please. So that would move us then, there's a lot in this report again, but I wanted to spend a little time thinking about the current process versus the proposed 3-stream permit approval process. So this would apply to the properties group if the two committees were to be moved forward with approval by council. So in our current process, which is the one you all know and operate within quite often, we have applications come in for pre-consultation. They usually ask some questions. Staff can provide direction on what's required for an application. The application is then submitted, it's deemed complete, it's assessed for whether or not it can be approved through a delegated approval through the authority that's offered through the bylaw, or if it's an emergency approval. If it moves to that left stream or that left leg of the process, then it becomes an approval process that happens just with staff, and we report on that to council as required. And we also issue an update to committee, as you know, on emergency approvals. But most of the applications then move through that right leg of this process. These are permit applications under both Part 4 and Part 5. We do treat them slightly differently in the structure of the recommendations, as you well know. But these then come to committee with a recommendation from staff. We have the discussions that we do have here at committee, and they ultimately move on to council to render that final decision. It's important to note council is the ultimate authority on all heritage decisions. So any delegation of authority to either a staff member or alternately to anyone else within the corporation, that is ultimately able to go back to council if anyone would like to appeal or have a secondary discussion or consideration. Next slide, please. So I'm going to get into these legs separately. And again, I'm trying to be concise here, and I appreciate your patience. But what I really wanted to highlight here, this is the recommended approval process on whole, very difficult to read, I'm sure. But what I wanted to highlight on this slide is really that second box from the starting block. So here we see a heritage permit application submitted, not deemed complete yet. This is what previously we would have called pre-consultation. And under that, you see weekly roundtable. And this is a new addition. The intent of the weekly roundtable is not to render a decision. It is not to offer formal feedback or requirement, but it is an opportunity for members of the Heritage Committee, as well as members of the public or members of the working groups of the committee, the Properties Committee in the future, if we move this way. It would be an opportunity for them to have an informal opportunity to meet with an applicant if they're interested in, talking through their process, to exploring other options. And at the same weekly roundtable meeting is where staff would publicly share the direction through which the application will move. In the past, and you have seen this as committee members, at times staff have emailed the committee and said, we feel this could be a DA, that there are aspects of it that we feel are a bit complicated. Would the committee like to offer any of your insights? And that has helped staff refine decision-making around delegated approvals and the authority that we have been granted by council to offer certain permits. So the roundtable opportunity is a place then where staff could also confirm which stream, if we will, the application will move forward through. This responds to the feedback we've received around transparency, in making sure that everyone is as open and there is as much opportunity as possible for applicants to receive information and learning about their heritage properties through not only the expertise of staff, but also the support and the expertise that's represented by interested members of the committee and or the working groups. And then moving from that weekly roundtable, the application would be streamed and we would then move into one of the 3 stream processes below. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about each of those now. Next slide, please. For what we're calling currently minor applications, things would move through what we would currently call sort of the delegated authority stream of our existing process. These would be applications that have no significant impact on a heritage property's attributes or are specifically outlined and covered in the delegated authority bylaw and the procedural bylaw for heritage. These are going to be minor alterations, again, with very little, if any, impact on a heritage property's attributes. And these would then move through a delegated approval, which means staff would write a recommendation as they do currently for delegated approvals. The director, myself, would receive them. And we would then be able to issue a permit on about approximately 10 to 15 business days. And the important part about this stream and the way that we've explored adding no significant impact is that currently the Delegated Authority bylaw offers a list of things, and the staff really are saying, is it on the list or isn't it on the list? And you as a committee have seen several permit applications come through that really they've had no significant impact on a heritage property's attributes, and yet they still required a full staff report, they still required council and committee's time for consideration. So the desire here is to really, improve the process for applicants and for the committee and for council when there really is no impact to a heritage attribute, but a permit is still required. It's important to note that if for some reason it's deemed by staff or perhaps even by myself as the director or anyone in that role, that this should not be granted through a Stream 1 approval process, it can be declined, which automatically just bumps it up to the next level. Next slide, please. So Stream 2 is most familiar to the committee with an alteration. So this is really what we do with Part 4 applications, kind of isolated into a single stream process. So what we mean by that is that these are impacting heritage applications. These are alterations to structures that will impact heritage attributes. They're likely larger scale exterior alterations coming in under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. And these impacting approvals will require a staff report and a recommendation to the committee. They would come up to the committee just like Part 4 reports do now. The committee would have opportunity to engage with the application. The committee would have opportunity to offer early comment through Dash, but also to amend the recommendation at the committee meeting. And then once the committee meeting is complete, or the important part here is that when the recommendation at the committee meeting is voted on, if there is agreement, i.e. there is a clear majority vote from the committee, there is support by staff for the recommendation, even if amended, and the applicant is in support of the recommendation. So if we have 3 streams of agreement, then the permit, if council approves this process, would be issued after the committee meeting under the delegated authority of the director. And that would decrease the application processing time from the maximum 90 days to approximately 45 calendar days. Currently, and it's important to note that the majority of Part 4 applications, if we look back over the last several years, would have their permit issued after the committee meeting if this new process were to be adopted. Most applications, as we know, when the committee supports them, when the applicant supports them, when staff support them, when we have that three-way agreement, council does not, I cannot think in recent history of an example where council has taken an alternate perspective and moved in a different direction when staff, the applicant, as well as the committee are in agreement on the process. And so the permit would be issued here by the director. If any one of those groups disagrees, if the applicant disagrees, if the committee does not support, if staff cannot support an amendment that is made at committee, then it bumps up to council as the ultimate decision maker on the file. Next slide, please. So the third stream then is where council's decision-making authority is required under the Ontario Heritage Act. And council must render the decision when applications come in to erect, demolish, or remove any building or structure on a designated heritage property. So those are required to be considered by council. Council cannot delegate that authority. Those applications would automatically go up to council. Council also considers applications under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act. So in the Stream 3 process, those applications would still come to the committee as they do currently for comment and feedback through the DASH process. And ultimately they would, however, like our Part 5s do at present, they would go up to council to render the final approval on that permit. The other part of this third stream is any decision at Stream 1 or Stream 2, which was not able to be rendered and a permit issued, would automatically then roll up for council's consideration. So it would still come to the committee for comment, feedback. If there was disagreement at the committee between the applicant, staff, or the committee membership, it would automatically go up to council. At times, staff may also decide to bump something up to council, even when there is agreement for reasons of complexity, or perhaps there's a political need for council to be brought into that discussion. And council could also request essentially to bump up an application to council for consideration. Through the third stream process, we would be within the 60-day target, but we would have that extended 90-day application turnaround as required through the Ontario Heritage Act. Next slide, please. So I hope that that has helped to explain a little bit more about how those three streams are intended to work. As I've shared, there's a lot of information in this report. And this is an information report. We're very excited to receive feedback from the committee on this. I also did want to confirm with committee that we would also be willing to receive feedback that we can add in and share with the working group through correspondence, if that is more suitable to the committee members. If you have additional follow-up outside of the meeting, we would like to request that if you have information that you're going to send via email, that if you could do so by May 31st, that would be very helpful to us in moving this forward, bringing it back to the working group. So our next steps include taking that feedback, consolidating it, reconvening the working group to discuss, confirming the final recommendations. Staff would then pursue updating procedural bylaws and committee agenda structures. That entire package would then go to council for consideration. And again, important to note that the timeline for implementation, we are trying to pursue this in congruence or aligning to the turnover of council. It seems appropriate that we would start council committees, et cetera. So we would be looking at a 2023 move. So thank you so much. Next slide, I think is just our question slide holder. But happy to receive any questions, feedback, either today or through written submissions down the line. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. So my understanding then is that you can either take questions now, or we can submit written questions or comments to you, preferably by May 31st.
Thank you. And through you, yes, we'd love to, if we could take questions, that would be wonderful. But if people have additional comments or considerations, I think submitting those would also be very helpful.
Yeah, because I know there's a lot to take in there and to think about. So, committee, do you have any comments or questions, or do you want to think about this? Done?
Yes, thank you. Well, as you know, I'm a member of I've been a member of the review working group, and I want to thank Jennifer for excellent presentation, and also I think recognize that the committee has done some excellent work in a difficult, somewhat lengthy review procedure, and have come up with some very good recommendations. I thought at this point I'd just like to highlight some things that committee members should think carefully about when they're thinking about making suggestions or questions. So just to very quickly run through the main points is that the recommendations include a separation of the built heritage work from general cultural heritage work. And I think that is a really important thing to do, because we found that really it really wasn't working before. Those two areas, although they both sound as if they have much in common, in fact, were very different. And I think going forward, it'll work much better as two separate committees. Next point is, I think, the introduction of the three-stream approach is excellent. And again, I think it can lead to simplifications and efficiencies in handling applications. And so we hope that that's implemented and works well. In particular, the proposed roundtable procedure is really very interesting. It's new, and I think it is going to be a work in progress until we see how it works. But I think it's very important that community members are sort of engaged with this proposed roundtable, because if they don't support it and take part occasionally, then it really isn't going to work. So committee members should be thinking about that and how they can take part in those kinds of informal discussions. I guess the remainder of my comments have to do with delegated authority. And, this has been an ongoing concern over the last few years. And again, Jennifer has referred to that and made comments which are going to lead to improvement, but I still have some concerns, and I'd like to bring them to the committee's attention. In the last 10, 15 years, the city has added a number of heritage planners, and they are excellent people. And at the same time, been a lot more applications for heritage alterations. So it's really essential that we have a procedure where staff can deal with sort of minor applications, and the important ones, major ones, come to the committee. And about 5 or 6 years ago, we had a delegated authority bylaw which aimed to do just that. But in practice, it didn't seem to work very well. And we have seen, committee members have seen examples of problems. One, and I'll just mention one, is 168 Wellington, the corner of Wellington and Brock, the former Scotiabank, former Earl and Grey building, a very important Part 4 building. Recently, it's, as you probably noticed, undergone major renovations, new windows, new roofing, masonry repairs, and that was approved by staff without the committee knowing about it, without council knowing about it, without the public knowing about it. Now that really, I think, represents a failure of interpretation of delegated authority. And at the same time, committee have also seen recently an application for signage at that building. And that could easily be considered a minor alteration, but it's come to the committee. We've seen it on Dash, we've made comments, it's going to come before the committee for discussion. So, when we have an example like that, we have to say that we have to improve the delegated authority procedure. And Jennifer has promised that that will be the case. And in particular, she mentions that the objective in future is that alterations that have significant impacts on the heritage attributes should come to the committee. So that's good. That's what should happen. But if we look in detail at the current wording of the report, I don't think that's really satisfactory yet. And I don't know if the committee can see page 149 of the agenda. I think I'm trying to get it here. That part of it deals with delegated authority. Yes, at the bottom of page 149, it says applications that are considered minor are defined as those that have no significant impact on the heritage property's heritage attributes. And that's what we understood. But then it says, and or are specifically outlined in the delegated authority bylaw. So that word or means that the previous sentence could be ignored and that staff would simply look at a list. And that list includes things like alterations to windows. And so that's a problem that we got in before, and I think we really must get out of that. And so certainly when the review working group reconvenes, I'm going to suggest that the word or be removed, or that the item referring to windows alterations be removed, because alterations of heritage windows are almost never minor. Some of them might be, but I think we've all seen examples recently where it's been very difficult, very controversial, and we need all the resources, all the knowledge that we have available in the committee and staff to bring to bear on those cases. So that's the issue, I think, that still remains under delegated authority, to get the wording right. We thought it was okay 5 or 6 years ago, but it isn't working. It hasn't worked. And I hope that when this process is completed, that part of it will be much better. So thank you very much.
Good, thank you. Jennifer, do you want to briefly answer that one?
Thank you, and through you, I certainly I don't want to answer per se. I think Don's comments, well structured and stand for themselves. I just wanted to point out that the staff report is not my report. It is the report of the findings and the recommendations of the working group. And I think Don is correct that the feedback from committee and where you structure any of your inputs or your thoughts or your concerns are certainly very helpful in the working group coming back together. Ultimately, staff will write the report, and if there is dissent or a difference of opinion, the report would reflect that when it's sent to council. I guess I just wanted to point out and share in the discussion on delegated authority, this was and has been a large and contentious and at times, quite emotional discussion with the working group. It's been a great group to work with, and we've put a lot of stuff on the table. But I also just wanted to add that we did discuss the list, and we did discuss windows and their inclusion under delegated authority, et cetera. And Don is certainly representing a position that he has shared and concerns he has raised at the working group. But I also just wanted to point out that working group members are not of one mind on this. And certainly the feedback we have received from both the working group and members of the public, we've seen a call for increased delegated authority. We've seen working group members quite satisfied that there is a list within the delegated authority bylaw. And also, I think the key focus here is that we want to have approvals on, heritage alterations that do not impact attributes. I think that is the shared position. I certainly, as a staff member, am in support of allowing things like windows policies to stand. The purpose of the policy is to allow for approvals when there is compliance. So I would be, speaking, I guess, against moving only to a single clause that says non-impacting without a list, because we've seen that applicants don't understand what that means. And it's very helpful to them to understand that if you're updating your soffits with, a like for like intent, and it's over 10%, that we could approve that through a delegated approval process. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Jan Leclerc, member of the public.
Hi there. I'm just wondering if there's been any discussion at all. I'm hearing, some positive steps forward about, you refer back to the equity piece that you're looking at and membership, which is just terrific. I'm wondering if there's been any element of discussion in the Heritage Committee groups about the environment in relation to energy efficiency, incorporated in. I know it gets to be very gray and challenging, but there's been a lot of talk in the last 10 minutes about windows as an example. So let's talk about windows and doors. 30, 32, 34, and 36 Sydenham Street, which is where we live, has no insulation. So whenever we want to do upgrades in our houses, of course, we want them to be energy efficient, and also looking at the global issues of energy. I, for one, feel that's really important that heritage committees address those sorts of things. And I haven't heard anybody this morning talk about that as an element of part of your revamping. I know in my process of the roofing issues, I talked with Kingston Heritage Planners as well as our builder, Mark Peabody, who's going to be doing those dormers, about, is there any subcommittee where it's a combination of somebody from Heritage in the city, builders, residents from Sydenham Ward, to talk about drawing up possible sublists. And I reference this because my partner Drew and I have lived overseas for gap years, and we've lived in some very old buildings in Italy, in different parts of Italy. One was a 12th century building that was a stopping point between Rome and Assisi for monks and travelers. And the other heritage area we lived in was the former Jewish ghetto of Syracuse, Sicily. We also have family that lives in Siena. All of those areas are huge heritage areas of Italy. And for instance, Siena allows you to repaint your house and choose 3 colors. The Jewish ghetto area that we lived in allows you to change your windows and doors of your buildings, but you have 2 or 3 materials and 2 or 3 models pre-approved that you can source and go to if you're a homeowner there and you're wanting to do upgrades. Energy in Italy is very, very expensive. And so they're possibly ahead of countries like Canada in dealing with energy efficiency and upgrades to heritage buildings. So anyway, I'm just putting it out there. I think it's really important for the city to look at that. Younger people who are going to be buying these homes as us older folks give up our heritage homes and, either downgrade from 3-story winding staircases to single floor condominiums, et cetera, they're going to be thinking about the energy efficiency of these homes, and they're not going to want to buy them if they can't look at those kinds of upgrades that are cost efficient for them and also important for them. That's what the millennials and the Gen Zers are looking for. And if we want them to buy these houses so that they don't turn into part of that conglomerate real estate that's going on, where you see signs around the city that says, we buy houses, any shape, any kind, any time. We don't want these heritage homes to go into those hands, because we see homes around here that are owned by landlords who simply can't deal with the cost of retrofitting even a heritage front door. And so they rot until they're uninhabitable, and then there's no choice but to take them down. I see that every day when I walk my dog in the neighborhood. So I'm going to stop there. I can see a few people writing some notes, which is great. Thank you. I don't know if anybody has something to respond in the moment or respond via a memo, but I'll stop there.
Oh, thank you. My immediate comment would be, if you had followed the Heritage Committee over the years, you will find that our main purpose is not to replace the wonderful old windows and woodwork around the windows. The modern windows often are not as efficient as those, so we certainly keep that in mind. Councillor Oosterhoff.
Yeah, good morning. I really want to thank Jen, got the name right, sorry about that, Jen Leclerc, for those comments. I didn't know if this is the right forum for it, but I would love to have a deeper dive into that as well. I think that we can do an awful lot there yet. Just had a conference in Toronto at the King Edward Hotel, and I did a historic tour there. Mind-blowing, beautiful place, and every window in that place is a vinyl clad. You cannot tell the difference quality. It is a stunning quality building. You live and breathe the heritage of it, and I think that we need to hear what Jen says, and that for today's for today's homeowners, that we want to preserve heritage. I think we're at risk of losing homes if we don't adjust our position. So I would love to go further on that later on, but I actually, Mr. Chair, have a meeting at just after 11, so I may disappear, but I appreciate Jen's comment.
No, thank you.
I offered to sit on a committee if we struck one.
I will be there too.
So, Councillor Oosterhoff, please keep that in mind in your comments back to the Jennifer Campbell, and that will no doubt be picked up. Jennifer, you had a hand up as well.
Yes, thank you, and through you, I also wanted to thank Jan for those comments, and for Councillor Oosterhoff. I just also wanted to make sure that it was clear that the report before you today, one of the reasons why it doesn't get into discussions like this is that this is really about the procedures to process things and to make those considerations. Now, that is not to suggest that the discussion you're referencing isn't an important one. It absolutely is. But we would more likely see it coming through with updates on HCDs that might make environmental consideration potentially a part of an HCD application. We would see it through updates to the windows policy, which I know Phil is actually currently working on internally, and we would be doing some public outreach on that as well, because we do want to encourage property owners to maintain heritage properties. We don't like to see old things taken out and replaced with new. We do firmly believe that well-maintained older buildings are environmentally sound. That being said, we also want to support property owners in successfully stewarding those properties moving forward. And we recognize that if our policies and our processes are such that we basically arrest people's maintenance because it becomes so prohibitive, that we have a different problem emerging. So we're aware of that. Jan, I really take your points, and I just don't mean to suggest we're not addressing them, but this discussion today is more focused on the process by which we would receive those approvals. But there are a lot of opportunities, and particularly with a council like ours that have highlighted the climate emergency. We have been taking that into consideration as well. So thank you.
Oh, good. Thank you, Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Jen. I really appreciate the points that you brought up. And I think we need to listen to that. And it is something that we need to discuss further. Going back to process, Jennifer, you said that the new process would be implemented with new council. On your first slide, you talked about like the different steps that in different discussions that were raised. Was training for committee members raised as well? And will that be incorporated for the new term and these new for this new process?
Thank you. And if I may, through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, great question, Councillor Doherty. There was a lot of discussion about training of not only committee members, actually the ongoing training commitment to staff, because heritage is, even though it's old things, they move and our care of them changes. So we did talk about that. It wasn't a recommendation per se, because it is an existing direction that every new committee should receive training into the processes. With the 2 new committees, if council does approve that move, we would obviously, I think it would also be helpful. We'd be able to get deeper into the specific subject matter of each of those committees. Right now, you receive somewhat omnibus training, which is sort of downloading, a ton of information. So yes, training of new membership, ongoing updates from committee, and the education of committee as things shift in heritage practice and policy is obviously going to remain a focus. Not a specific recommendation, because it is already kind of baked into what we do with new committees.
Great, thanks. And I do have another question, and that's a typical, I guess, councillor question, because we have so many committees that we sit on. I just wondered if there was any thought of, like you mentioned the overlap with museums and historical culture. With perhaps the arts advisory or another committee. Like, I think perhaps they were together before. I know there's shifts back and forth in the past, but wonder if there were some discussions around that. Not creating yet another committee.
Thank you. And again, through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, we did have a pretty good discussion about frequency of meetings. We also talked with the clerks group about what would it look like to return to having an additional committee. I should have pointed out, I believe it is in the report as well, but the programs committee, it's intended that would meet quarterly. And so that would really align with what we see with the workflow coming from that area. I did have a discussion with the Director of Arts and Culture Services at one point about whether or not it would make sense to kind of add this into the Arts Advisory Group. The decision at that time was that, the collections management aspect of this, the conservation science components really didn't align as nicely, though the programming might align. So the decision wasn't to move that way, but we would be looking at a quarterly meeting or as necessary. And then, of course, with the Heritage Properties Group, just the legislative requirements, still having those monthly meetings.
Great, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Don Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. So I would have to submit comments, so I'll take you up on that May 31st deadline. But I'll offer a few high-level things. In general, I agreed. I'm going to go through 4 things and I'm going to go back. In general, I agreed with the recommendations, the 7 recommendations. I also agreed with the 3 streams. When I read it, I thought that was effective. I agreed with the weekly Heritage Roundtable. And the 4th big point I wanted to pull out is I agree with the training program. To go back, and I have a couple questions, but to go back and expand a little further, I know that when speaking to recommendation number 4 first, I guess, is education. I'm going to come back to it. Recommendation number 5, I know that when KEDCO advocates for who's on their board, and in that process, it's a face-to-face relationship and engagement. And I had wondered whether or not more than just writing down a wish list of the skill sets you're looking for, I think there should be some kind of face-to-face conversation. I learned on my 6 years of being on the accessibility committee that it's about being in the room, it's about being at the table, and it's about, Councillor Doherty and I are channeling each other because 2 points she brought up are the exact same points I have, but it's something in the way that Councillor Doherty brings it up that then helps me. And that doesn't happen if it's just a written piece of paper. So I would encourage for recommendation 5 that there is something more conscious and more relationship building and interactive. Moving down to, so that was A. B. I'm going to speak to B last because that's my education piece. So moving to C, here's one of my questions. Are the Stream 2 approvals by the director reported to council alongside the stream 2 and 3 approvals that require council approval. I just was worried about how you capture an understanding of what's going on if only the pieces that council is going to make a decision on go to council. And in some cases, there may be overlap and there's a learning process kind of going on there. So that one popped out at me. And then the second question about stream 2 is, and I think this has happened in recent years, but what if the general public is very much concerned about an application that staff, the applicant, and committee maybe understand more fully, and therefore you're seeing a political public concern? And how would you handle that if you're going to do a director decision versus? So is there a bump up? And you could look at, there are several places where I think you could consider bump up, but how do you deviate outside of the stream 2 box on that? And then I think I have 2 points and they're kind of both education. So it's a huge learning curve, huge amount of time, onerous amount of work. I've sometimes spent, starting with accessibility, when you talk about some of the projects that I was on, I could spend 15 hours a week or more on some of these, between the meetings, the individual projects. You're on a dozen projects as an accessibility member. That's a lot of time from the general public. So if I reverse the equation and if I try to be really concise, my question to you is, what do we do to encourage the public to be involved? So a lot of this is engineered from the idea of getting expert opinion, but we have a lot of expert opinion already. And I know the committee needs it, absolutely, for sure. But the other thing is, what encourages people to get involved? And so that whole education piece, and this is maybe an offline conversation, I wondered about how you can break that down and really look at how we're bringing people along. You have 3 committee members right now who sit on a massive expertise developed over years and years and years, and they're your major inputs prior to the staff report. So how do we come together at the round table and have some of those people, have 1 or 2 of them there, but then provide opportunity for newer people to learn from them and to develop along? We have a lot of redundancy in what we do. We talk about Windows a lot, but a lot of it is redundant. And so I don't want to go on and on and on, but I just think that whole education piece before someone arrives to committee, once they're on committee, how they're onboarded, all of that, I think could be stronger. My sense is it was stronger when I joined the accessibility committee. It's been less strong since I joined the heritage committee. And accessibility was a lot of work, but I think heritage has more nuance. There's more you have to know and more you have to learn. I would express a little bit differently, Councillor Doherty, but human resource management, I think, is a really, and I pulled out my project management book to have a look at it, because I like the way that we take diversity and we plop it together for a project. And so I wondered about that with some of the committee stuff too. So I agree about arts advisory, particularly for the committee that's about activating cultural heritage, and so I'd also wondered about accessibility and some of the other committees or public stakeholders that you could involve in some of those processes, if you could work it out, that they're allowed to join in a fashion that doesn't compromise your quorums and your mandates, et cetera. Because I think you get a richer mix. And I think that you're also priming transitions from one committee to another, so that somebody's on heritage might end up on arts advisory, or they might end up on another committee, and that would help with that. So, and it would also break down some of the silos, because some of the ways that things move through planning, or they move through heritage, or they go to accessibility site plan, those connections aren't really there. So I thought there were opportunities to bring some of that together. And I think that's probably covered at a very, very high level, everything. The final key thing I would come back to, just about the names, just to pick on the names just for a second. I want you to inspire me to be involved. I understand properties make sense. And it kind of has a twofold purpose. One part of it is promoting, and the other part of it is dealing with applications. But the other one with programs, it's like when Arts and Rec comes to accessibility and they go through the laundry list of all the programs, and you're kind of almost asleep by the, the 15th program or something. I think it's got to be more. I used the word activate earlier. I think it's got to be something more about activation. And anyway, the rest I'll write down for you. Thank you for your indulgence of letting me go on and on. Great work. That's the final piece. Great work.
Good. Thank you very much, Don. Jennifer, you don't have to answer.
Well, if I may, there's just a couple of points, and Don, I really appreciate that you're going to submit them, and that would be great. Just on a high level, KEDCO as a board operates somewhat differently than a committee, and so the structure for feedback to the nominations is different than for committees of council. Council is essentially through its choice or its appointment of people to committees. They are essentially allowing those committees to act in their stead. And so council has retained some pretty strong authority in that nominations process. But point well taken, and I think the opportunity to provide that nominations committee with as much information as we can possibly give to allow them to make the best decisions that they're able to. I think that is certainly something that everyone would share interest in. Just in terms of the bump up discussion and the political comments, or if something is political or the public in particular may not align to the three groups that are sort of listed in the approvals, we have retained, essentially, it is not formal like we have in the planning process of a technical bump up, but there is essentially intended to be an informal opportunity to bump up. I think we can clarify some of the language around that. But this is one of those areas where, for example, if it was to come to the director for approval and suddenly there were letters coming in with opposition being raised, we would not want to issue that. We would bump that up to council for consideration. And also when approvals are issued at delegated authority, they are reported to council. That is a requirement of any delegated approval process. Just moving quickly through some other things I want to comment on here. I think the education and time commitment component, that is well received as well. The EDI committee has been working with the clerks committee to think about ways to encourage and involve more people in committees across the board. And I think there's a lot of shared learning that we need to bring into this process there. But I also wanted to point out, how do we get public more involved was a big discussion. And there is no perfect answer, but I think one mechanism we've already started to see the benefit of is increased communications and public communications over various platforms to heritage property owners and people who are interested. We sent a mail out in January to heritage property owners, and the feedback we've received from property owners who want to learn more about committee, want to understand more about how they take care of their homes. So we've already seen the benefit of that. And I think we need to continue to amplify and grow that public communication. And then finally, the balance of committee and resources is something, actually the amalgamation of Heritage Kingston into one committee was actually generated out of a comprehensive review of the committees of the City of Kingston to look at ways to streamline and reduce redundancy and overlap. And yet we are an example, I think, of a committee where that went too far. And I think the interaction between committees is always something we as staff are trying to balance against the time and the resource that it takes. So just for everyone's awareness, if you want to get a committee report to 6 different committees for input, it has serious timeline impacts because those reports are all independent, they have to be circulated, et cetera, et cetera. So again, I think we need to be very aware though, Don, I take your point very, very much to heart that there are ways we should be doing better engagement cross committee, either through shared membership or even just information sharing about decisions that are being discussed at one committee versus another. I think we can certainly look at how we can improve that process. So just wanted to offer those preliminary comments. Very thankful for your thoughts and for your written submission as well. I'm sure it will be great.
Good, thank you very much. So that's just 2 weeks until May 31st. I presume that you're not going to close the mailbox down on that date exactly for a day or so late. But I would ask I'd ask committee members to think carefully and to make those responses. 2 questions then to you, Jen. Could you send us a copy of the PowerPoint that you did this morning? Because it summarizes rather well, and it may. And secondly, either you or Elizabeth, could you send a reminder on about the 28th that, hey guys, you've got 3 days to send your comments in, because I know exactly what's going to happen with holidays in the middle. Any further last comments on that, Elizabeth?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I do note that we do have another member of the public here who has their hand raised in order to provide some additional comment. If we could allow Ms. Bailey to speak at this time.
Okay, Shirley.
Good morning, Chair and committee members, and a special thank you to Dr. Campbell for her excellent presentation this morning. That's much appreciated. The committee can probably imagine that the foundation is very, very pleased to hear that the committee will now be split into two. Our concern overall, while we understood why they came together, we always looked to the number of applicants and the number of contractors who wait very patiently through sometimes very long meetings for their turn. So during a very busy construction season, I think this will really help to give Heritage a better reputation in terms of the committee working more efficiently. So thank you very much from the board for that. I haven't actually had a chance to speak in detail with the board, so thank you for the presentation this morning. And I wonder if there's a chance that we too could have the PowerPoint, Jennifer, so that I could share that with the board, because if there are other comments, we would certainly like to provide them before the end of the month. The three streams, I think, is a very can I say rational? I really like what you're doing with part 4, and to get that approval on 3 parts and to be able to expedite things that way to 45 days will be amazing. I think what we do not know at this point, I mean, to me, being a former land use planner, I'm very wary of what will now be the new legislated timelines for Planning Act applications, and I think this will have a bearing on heritage approvals. So, and I cannot give you details at this point, but when I read through Bill 109, I believe it was, I thought, oh dear, this is really going to impact on heritage. But the round table, I must say, I think is a wonderful idea, and I do hope and encourage the committee members to take part in that. I think that this will be extremely helpful to many owners of heritage, whether they're heritage protector, people who are interested in protecting their building. I think it's a much, an informal process like that is so much less intimidating than actually coming to the committee, right? I mean, people really are scared, right? When they are expected to speak before. I mean, I can feel myself today tense, thinking, okay, what am I going to say to the committee, right? And all I really want to say is job well done. So anyway, thank you all. And a special shout out to not only to Dawn Taylor, who was on the committee, but Helen Finley and Bruce Downey. And I don't know the other members, Jennifer, but maybe you could relay that. Maybe it's in the report and I just haven't read it carefully, but thank you again for a job very well done.
Good, thank you, Shirley. Yeah, the round table, of course, is an old idea. When the Heritage Resource Centre was first set up, the intent there was for it to be open one afternoon a week for the public to come in and get ideas, and it sort of got lost somewhere. Other comments, Jennifer?
Maybe I jumped the gun a little bit, Peter, but I just wanted to say thank you as well to the members of the working group. It has been, as I said, a really important discussion. Georgina, Laura Phillips, and Dalton, Dawn, of course, Helen Finley, and Bruce Downey, myself and Andrea have been involved not only as co-chairs, but also as members. It was a really equitable kind of working group situation. Very thankful for that. I also just wanted to comment very quickly. Shirley rightly points out legislative changes in the Planning Act and also, Bill 109. We've seen moves from the current government that, depending on the outcome of the election, may manifest in different heritage processes. And all of that will need to be considered in the timelines in particular, if we do get direction that we're required to move differently. I will circulate PowerPoints to everyone that has requested. And we can also send that reminder on May 28th, asking for additional feedback. I also will just take this moment to highlight as well, the June meeting already has 10 permit applications on the agenda. So I'm just highlighting as well that the June meeting, in addition to a programming update, is going to be quite long.
Okay, thank you very much. Always welcome these comments from you, of course. Any further comments on the report, knowing that you can send your comments in writing, and seeing none. Back to our agenda then. Working groups, I guess that was the working group report. Emergency approvals. Philip, anything emergency? I think Philip just has left his picture.
Hello there, Mr. Chair.
Oh, yeah, emergency approvals.
Yes.
Do we have any?
We have a few there.
Oh.
My apologies. Hello again. Okay. So we have one at, sorry, my apologies. I'm just trying to bring this up here. So we have one at 890 Front Street, which is just to address that infiltrations into a window. They're going to be coming in to get a full window assessment shortly. This is just to stop air, water, and organic growth infiltration into windows. And these windows are not period windows. So I wanted to emphasize that. So that's the first one. The next one is 7 Emily Street, which is actually one that I mistakenly circulated to the committee there. So that was actually masonry work that is going to be occurring on the inside of the property and on the outside. And so they're doing that to address water infiltration. And so that's being dealt with right now. And we also have one other one, I believe. My apologies. Let me just make sure I have this here. So we have one at 171 Wellington Street, which was to address safety concerns because there were people who were sleeping in the entranceway to the property. And so they wanted to add a gate behind the actual placard that shows the history of the area. And they were going to be adding that just to give some protection to their residents and to the property owners who are leasing the area, property owners, the businesses that are leasing the area. And so they have a gate that they added in that little carriageway.
So that's the carriageway, yeah. Okay.
That's right.
Okay, questions on those at all? Seeing none, then thank you very much. I have no motions. Any notices of motion? Any other business? I don't think we got any notice of any. You have 2 pieces of correspondence, the CHL News and Heritage Matters. We have a next meeting on June 15, which Jennifer warns you may be a long one. And unless I've left anything out, hearing nothing then, and look for a motion to adjourn. Don Mitchell, Don Taylor, thank you very much. Thank you. And don't forget to write to Jennifer with your comments on that review. Thank you all for your time, your patience, your input. Take care. Good. Goodbye.